welcome back. Hope you're doing great and enjoying this course so far, and also hopefully you've been able to follow along with building your own database while I've been doing so here in No Hats, No Stars. Now, I know it's been a lot to take in, and I truly commend you for your time and dedication in this course. That being said, this lesson is actually going to be a bit of a shorter one, relatively speaking. We will be having our first detailed look at some reporting. Now, it's been a few lessons since we went through that back office data admin one where I showed you all the different types of reports and report features and filters, etc. So today we'll be getting into our till balance report, which oddly enough does not have many filters and doesn't even have views that can be changed or edited. As you'll come to see, it is a pretty straightforward report that breaks down and presents a lot of important sales and other data, though there are a few things that we can choose using some back office settings to hide or show certain data within the report. Now, for the till balance report, we will not just be looking at it from back office. We will start off with a look at a basic example in back office, but then we'll also have a look at some till functions that we have that are related to and allow us to print the till balance report from SmartPOS. And then we will finish up with a quick look at a more complex example of a till balance report, but that will be from a different database than the one that I've been using in this course, just a different database that has some more data in it. But yeah, let's kick off and we'll get into back office. Alright, now before we get into it, I should preface by letting you know that I've completed a bunch, or at least a few, faux sales, some fake sales in my database today, just so I can generate some data and have the report actually show us something. You may or may not be able to do the same thing in your database, or maybe your system is live already and you'll be able to run the till balance report with some actual real data available. But there are a few things that we should go over before we do run the report. Firstly, I should explain a little bit more about what the till balance report is or what it can show us. In the back office data admin session, we didn't really get into too much about what this report was about. So essentially, this allows us to view all the sales data for the selected period, including the expected totals that the system has calculated. So as you'll see, that will include everything from the gross sales amount to each payment type and just everything in between. The exact data that's shown in the report will depend on the database and what's been recorded for the reporting period. And as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, it will depend on some back office settings that we can choose to show or hide certain data. Now, one of the things that may or may not show, depending on the database or depending on the venue, is if the venue has an active point system and there were points redeemed, they'll be shown. Obviously, if the venue doesn't have a point system, there won't be any points redeemed. There won't be anything shown referring to points in the till balance report. If the venue has a membership system and there were membership sales and some renewal sales during the reporting period, those will be shown. As I said, if those things are not in the venue, there's nothing to report there, and therefore nothing will be shown in regards to those. Point being that not everything that will potentially be seen on a till balance report will be seen in this lesson, and there's also a possibility that data that is shown in the examples in this lesson may not necessarily show in other databases. However, the same guiding principles and overall idea of the till balance report remains the same. We are able to see a summary of sales and see the total payments that should have been collected, which we can then compare against what was actually collected and make sure that balances. Hence the name of the report, the till balance report. We're trying to make sure or to check that the till is balanced. At its most basic sort of core, without even running and looking at the report, let's just pretend that the only payment type that we take in the venue is cash. And for our example's sake, let's pretend that we don't have any discounts or promotions or anything like that at all. So throughout the course of the shift or for the day, let's say we did $1,000 in sales. When we run the till balance, it'll show us that we sold that amount. And since we only accept cash and we don't have any discounts or promotions, we should have collected $1,000. And that amount should be in the drawer. Of course, if we started with a float in the drawer, there was a drawer clearance throughout the shift, that might be a little bit different. But just for our example's sake, we'll say that there was no drawer float at the start of the shift, and there were no drawer clearances throughout the shift, so there should be $1,000 in the drawer. But maybe when we count that, there's only $995, or maybe we count $1,002 instead, so the drawer could be under or over by a little bit. In other words, it does not balance exactly. So to summarize, this will show us any and all monetary related transactions that have occurred during the reporting period, and will include adjustments such as discounts and promotions, points that have been redeemed, account charges, any gift certificates that were redeemed, fees, service charges, surcharges, so on and so forth. It could end up looking a little bit complicated, but it really just tells a story of what has gone on at that till for that shift, or for the given reporting period. If it's not being run for a shift, we do have the ability to run it for different reporting periods also. Okay, the other thing that we should go over before and after, I guess while I run the report here, is that there are some back office settings, as I mentioned earlier, that will factor into some of the information that the report does show. So let's actually run it. You might remember from the previous reports lesson that we can find the till balance report within the sales reports menu, and it is the second one down, provided that your screen looks the same as mine here, and it's called the till balance report. You might also remember from that back office data admin lesson, as I mentioned earlier also, that most reports are going to have some sort of report filters and views to choose from. Now, there are no views to choose from for the till balance. It is what it is, caveat being the configurations that we're about to go over. Also though, there aren't really any filters aside from being able to set the display period and being able to select from the venue, store, and till list here which entity we'd like to report on. And by the way, if tills have multiple separate drawers, we'll be able to report on them separately. Now, none of mine do here, but so while this is called the till balance report, we can also use it to report on an entire store group, an entire store, even a whole venue, or the full organization, or again, we can do it for an individual drawer. And obviously we can run this report for a specific till. So I will select the main restaurant's first workstation here, which is the one that I use for sales in my database, and we can see that the report has been displayed there for us when I selected that. And by default, it is showing us the current shift. Now, as for the settings that we'll factor in, the first thing is what we'll see in the header section here. And oddly enough, this relates back to the printing lesson. So right now we're seeing this hospitality specialist, and ABN is all zeros there. This might look familiar to you from the printing lesson when we looked at printer formats. In fact, it is the header information from the standard receipt printer format. So you might be wondering, why is it showing here? Because this report can be printed from both back office and the till, what's being shown here is actually retrieved from the printer format configurations of either the workstation that's been selected or the server workstation in this case. So if we go ahead and we look at the printing setup for this till, since it's the receipt printer types format that the system's looking at here, and that's set to the standard receipt format, the till balance is going to adopt the header information from that. If I cancel out of this and we go ahead and review that printer format, you might remember that the header here is set to show us BPOS, hospitality specialist, and a fake ABN. Now if I change something here, maybe I'll just add a line, just write test in there, and we go back. I will actually need to close the till balance report and rerun it. There we go. Now we have another line added to the header here that says test, just in case you didn't believe me there. That has been updated for us. There are some other till level settings that will factor into other data being shown, but we will save that for a little bit later. For now, let's just look at what we've got here. So as a reminder, I have entered some faux sales for the day, including some discounts, some table sales, some retail sales, some different tender or payment types, etc. And by the way, as I said, we are looking at this for the current shift, which is going to be selected by default. We can certainly run it for other reporting periods if we'd like to, or we can set it for a manual range of shifts if we would like to do something like that. But by default, it's going to show for the current shift. And along the same lines, we could, if it's desired, we could run it for a full store, a store group, etc. But in saying all that, it is most commonly run at the end of the shift and for one till to balance that till for the shift, which is what we'll be doing here. So if we start under the header, we can see that the date and time that this report was run. This is very important because if it has been run while the business is active, the totals could likely change only a few seconds later. So if this report were to be printed or if it's run from SmartPause, it is important to know the exact time that the report was run when we're then looking at the totals. In the next section down, we can see where we're running it for. In this case, just the first workstation. I should probably rename that at some point actually. But if we were running this for a full store, for example, maybe for the main restaurant, that would show here instead. And we can see the shift or the shifts that this report is spanning. Again, in this case, only the current shift, but if we were looking at a full day or a week, for example, it would show as reporting from the first shift and through the last shift of the period that has been selected. And to get even more precise for when this report spans, in the next section down, we can see the date and the exact time of the first and the last transaction, in essence, the bounds of this report data. So even though we're looking at this for all of this shift, the first transaction of this shift was recorded at 2:35 p.m. It's a bit late for breakfast there. And the final transaction, you can see this was a couple minutes that I spent here, not very long at all, entering some phony sales, and the last transaction was entered at 2:38 p.m. Cool. Then from there, though, the report is going to be split up into a few different sections and subsections, beginning with the balance info and some payment details, but will most likely be different from there depending on the database. As I said, some may have an account details section. We have a small one here. Some won't. Some will have different miscellaneous details and tax details, and depending on the till configurations that we'll look at in a bit, can optionally show and hide certain data such as group totals for sorts and types, for example. Now if I go back up, the balance info section, this will start with gross sales, and then it will calculate down to get us a net total. So that's the gross sales minus any discounts, promotions, etc. By the way, the discounts will be listed out by their totalizer names. So this is the first time we're really seeing those in a report, but this highlights why we would want certain promotions and discounts reporting to a certain totalizer bucket, so that when we do run reports like this, we can see the total amounts for them. In this case, we are only showing two. We are showing our discount totalizer that's simply called promotion, and we're seeing the one that is that was set up by default in the system and assigned for package discounts. And we can see the quantities and the totals for those. So for just about everything in this report, we will be able to see the quantities and then the monetary amounts in the next two columns over. Now, if there are any taxes, surcharges, fees, etc., they will be listed here in this balance info section also, and they will be used to calculate the net total. But that isn't the end of the story yet. Any miscellaneous payments and charges will be broken down below that, listing the net amounts for each. For example, here we can see that payments were made to each of these table groups, are two of our table groups, the one that's just called table and the one that's called bar tab. We would also be able to see account payments and charges, any tip payouts, credit notes issued, credit notes redeemed, etc. There will sometimes be a subtotal shown here as well if there are things like drawer floats or drawer clearances involved that occurred throughout the shift. Basically, if the till started off with a sum of money in it to start the shift, or if some cash was cleared from the drawer during the shift and is being assumed that that's being kept in the safe in the office, we do need to know about that when we run the report so that we're not expecting that cash to actually still be in the drawer. But all of that will calculate through to give us the drawer total. That is the total monetary amount that should have been collected, in this case for this till and for this shift, which in this example was $500.50. Now that is a theoretical amount that should be there to be counted, but more on that in a minute. Speaking of theoretical amounts that should have been collected, the next main section down is going to be our payment details. So this is a simple breakdown by payment type with subtotals for cards. We can see here we did only collect payments for 2 different card types. This will also show any foreign currencies if the venue accepts them and they were collected. Any gift vouchers, external payment amounts, etc. will all be listed here. If there were more credit cards accepted than the 2 that we've got here, MasterCard for example, or maybe Diners Club or something like that, they would all be broken down and shown. In our case here, for the phony sales that I put through, I did only close out, you can see 3 to cash, 2 to Visa, and 1 to American Express. Also, if there were any drawer clearances, they'll be shown in this section as well to then calculate the cash total that should be in the drawer or drawers for the till. So the payment section could look quite different from one database to the next depending on the payment types that are accepted. And speaking of differences from one database to the next, the rest of the report could look drastically different depending on the operation. So you may or may not have an account details section, which would break down account sales, account charges versus payments. In this case, just showing the total payments for each table group. The overall account turnover would be shown if there were account sales, and the total points that have been used or spent by accounts will also have a monetary value shown for the amounts that have been used or spent. Then there may or may not be a miscellaneous details section, which will show the total orders and the average spend. That is very good information to have to keep track of that important metric, which is often used to gauge the venue's short-term performance. Now in this case, you may be wondering why there are only a quantity of 4 orders here, showing the average amount of $99.50, when if we look at the top, we actually closed out 5 transactions or 5 different payment types that were selected at least. That is because there was actually a table that had been opened from a previous lesson that I closed today. So that was the 5th payment that was accepted here. But this is actually showing just the orders for this shift. So there could be some things like that to look out for and be mindful of. In a real world scenario, at the end of a shift or the end of the day, someone would most likely be checking to make sure that there were no tables left open. In my case, that did not happen. I ended the last lesson, which must have been the printing lesson, and I left the table open in my database, and then when I went to enter in some fake sales today, I actually closed it out. But anyway, if there were any no sales, canceled sales, training sales, returns, they will all be listed in this miscellaneous section too, which would be very important since high amounts of those can indicate potential theft or at least potential training opportunities for operators if there are a lot of no sales and canceled sales and returns that have occurred. Now there should always be a tax details section, which we've got here, which will show a breakdown of taxed and tax-free sales, showing the tax amount and total sales for each. Now, if there are only taxed sales or only tax-free, they will just show as the one line. If there's, of course, no GST-free sales, there doesn't need to be a line to show that there aren't any, it just won't show. So that is as far as I can scroll. There's nothing else showing for this report at the moment, but there is an option to show more, which I've mentioned a couple times now. So if we head back to the workstation maintenance and to the flags/other tab, we have this little reporting section at the bottom, which can be used to show some sections that do not show by default, and to hide some of the sections that do show by default. For example, if we wanted to show types, type groups, sorts, and sort groups, we could just turn those flags on. That will then give us a little breakdown of sales for each of those by the categories, of course, that we define at the global level, which will basically allow for some quick analysis and comparisons if we are interested in that kind of data. We can also choose to show things like tips payout. That section would be useful if waitering and tips are in place, which will show card and cash tips totals, so very useful in waiter banking environments. And you can see the sections and other info that we can optionally choose to hide also if we would like to. Now feel free obviously to test out showing and hiding different things in your own database, but I will actually cancel this to leave this one alone for now. There is one last thing I want to show you from back office before we switch gears a little bit. And that one last thing, if we head back to the till balance report, is the ability to enter media counts using this button at the top. However, this can be done from SmartPOS, and it often would be, but I just want to show you that we have the option here. In fact, media counts can only be entered for one single shift and for one till or an individual drawer. So if I were to actually set this to, let's go with the main restaurant, and I tried to run that, I'm going to get a warning prompt letting me know that it can only be run for a single till or a drawer. And if I have a single till selected, and let's say I tried to run this for the current day and enter media count, I will not be able to. I'll get a prompt letting me know that it can only be run for a single shift. So if we do have that selected for one till or drawer, and just for a single shift, in this case for the current shift, we will be able to enter media counts. As I said, this can be done from SmartPOS, and we'll see how to do so momentarily, but from back office, this enter counts window will be split up into 4 columns, showing the media name, which is the tender or payment type, the quantity of each, and the theoretical amount for each, and then the actual counted and entered amount for each, which we can type into these fields here and then post our counts. So in this example, we have theoretically collected $160 in cash, $242.50 in Visa, and $98 in American Express. Now, if the media counts had already been entered from SmartPOS, we would be able to see them here, as well as in the report, which would show the difference between the theoretical and the counted, which we'll be able to see after we enter those here. But yeah, for example, the cash amount counted and entered is probably going to be the most important. By the way, we can choose to hide the theoretical amounts for the SmartPOS workflow using an operator privilege flag. Actually, they are hidden by default. We can show them optionally using an operator privilege flag, which I'll show you later. But with the theoretical showing, we do know that this is how much we should have for each of these media types. We would then count what we actually have and enter it in here. So maybe I've only counted 155, and then in most cases these amounts for the cards will be the same unless there's a credit card slip or something like that that's missing. But yeah, once we have all of those entered in for all of the different payment types that we've collected, we could then go post counts. And if we scroll down to our payment details section now, and we look at the report, we will be able to see those counted amounts that I just entered, along with the total amount that's been entered and the drawer difference, in this case minus $5, because I entered a amount for cash of $155 when the expected theoretical amount was $160 that was entered into the till as being collected. Now, it might depend on the venue and best practices and what is deemed an acceptable difference. If this were under by a lot, we might want to do a recount or start some sort of investigation straight away. We can always go back to enter media counts again, and we can enter an adjustment if we need to, and then a repost. So yeah, what we've seen here is a somewhat basic example of a till balance report. albeit again with some phony data. Obviously, most databases, tills would have more sales than this throughout a given shift and probably spanning more than a little over 2 minutes here, but hopefully this still gets the point across. So what we'll do now is we'll look at the till function buttons that we have, which can be used to run the report from SmartPause, and we have a few options to do some other things. So I will head to our till function maps, and I will open the one that's assigned to our workstation. As you've come to know by now, of course, the till function maps are completely customizable. So depending on maybe which template was used in your database, or maybe which function map was copied, you may or may not have these till function buttons already on one of your function map panels. You will need to do a bit of looking around in your database to see if you have these already somewhere, and you may need to add them to a new panel. You may need to add another panel to your function map altogether, but we've gone over that in some past lessons, so we will not review that stuff today. For mine here, I do have a reports panel, if I can find it, it's all the way at the bottom here, a reports panel that has already been outfitted with numerous iterations of the till function button called print balance report. There's also a couple panel selection buttons in other panels to get here, so that from SmartPause, I will first need to go to this manager panel. I have a panel selection button here, which is pointing to the manager 2 panel. And from the manager 2 panel, I have a panel selection function button over here that points to the reports panel. So on the reports panel is then where I have all of these. So that is the workflow that I'll need to go through to access these from SmartPause. But anyway, this particular subfunction, this print balance report, which is used to print the balance report, is within this manager function menu. Just in case you are locating that manually, of course, don't forget that we do have the find function option here to search for a function or subfunction name. But yeah, what this does, we can see what it will do by default. It will print the till balance for the current till shift, and it asks to change the shift afterwards. Now, like I said, I've got a few iterations of it set up here already. One to print for the day, one to print for the week, one to print for the month. I do have a double button over here on the right to print it for the current shift. And using all three, the item, sub-item, and key fields, we can see that there are a ton of options that we can set for it. So for the item field, we can skip a shift change, since it will default to change the shift once the report is run. Maybe we don't want that happening. So for example, for these options for printing the balance for the day, the week, and the month, I have entered 1 into that field. For the daily report here, I've actually entered in, I do want that as 1. I've got a different one set up here that I'll show you in a second that will use that option. But yeah, for those, let me just go ahead and save that too. So for those, we would want to skip the shift change. By the way, we do have separate till functions that can be used to change shifts. Those are down here. We'll go over those in a second. But anyway, also for the item field, we can set it up to open the till drawer. We can ask for a shift comment. So some operations may want to enforce that a comment is entered, just to give management the opportunity to write a little blurb about the business or something that happened during that shift. We can choose not to require manager privileges to use this till function and to run the report. And we can set this up to ask for an operator, meaning that we will be able to print the balance report for an individual operator. That is something that would definitely be used in table waiter environments. And I do have a separate one set up here, which is labeled operator shift balance. So in this case, this has been configured as 16. So 1 to skip the shift plus 16 to ask the operator. So we won't do a shift change, and it will prompt to ask for the operator. In that case, we just enter the operator number and we can run the balance report for an individual operator. Now the sub-item field, that can be used to preset some configurations for the button based on those till level print flags that we saw a couple minutes ago. So even if something is showing or hidden at the till level, we can override that when a specific iteration of the till balance report till function is being used. And lastly, for the key field, we can configure which period to report on. So if I click through these, you can see that I've got different numbers entered into that field corresponding to each of these report periods. As you can see that there are literally dozens of different combinations that we could create, some more likely than others, of course, but by all means, again, feel free to test out some different things in your database that might suit your organization's needs. For our demo here, I'm just going to leave these as is, some different iterations for separate report periods, and a few different ones for the shift. Again, we've got the option to print it for operators, to print it for the shift without changing shifts. So we've got that skip shift change there, and then to print for the shift and yes, to change the shift. So nothing has been entered into the item field for this one. That's why that is labeled as shift balance and change shift. I'll also point out that we do have a separate till function for entering media counts. That needs to be used if we would like to enter those either before or after running the balance report. The workflow for the enter media counts till function is that it will also change shifts by default after the counts have been entered. So really up to you which workflow you'd like to follow, to either print the report first without changing shifts and then enter counts and change the shift when the counts are entered, or vice versa, or maybe neither and change the shifts manually using one of these here. So I've got one labeled next shift. So this is a change shift till function, which will also ask to print the till balance, by the way, and has a few similar options to what we've seen with the other print balance function. And then we've got the one next to that. The one next to that here, which is change to next day shift. I've got it labeled as first shift tomorrow, and it is going to do exactly that. We can see it will change to the first shift of the next day if within 8 hours of the next start of day time. So just something to consider there. It's that roll time of day that we can configure at the venue level. But anyway, back to our media counts function. It has its own configuration options, including the ability to skip a shift change, to hide theoreticals, which again we can control at the operator level, and a handful of other options here which may or may not want to be used in every environment. Some different things here to control some security things, so on and so forth. The final till function that I'll show you today is this one that I've got labeled here as balance selection, which is a till function called balance selection screen. A few things that we can preset here, but we can see that this will display a selection screen for printing various till balance information. Reporting period and information to include can be selected by the operator. So it's basically an alternative option if we want to pick and choose to run a portion of the overall till balance without all the other bells and whistles involved for changing shifts and so on. One final thing I want to show you before we head to Smart Pause are some related operator privileges that I've mentioned a couple times, or one of them I've mentioned, one of them I haven't. I'll just go to our support staff here and over to the till privileges tab, and we have one that is labeled as media totals required. So this would be, firstly, if operator clocking is used in the organization, this will enforce that an operator cannot clock out without first entering media totals. That may want to be turned on for certain operators, specifically in waiter banking environments where we may want to enforce that an operator cannot clock out until they've entered their media totals. And then we've got media totals theoreticals show. So by default, the theoretical counts are going to be hidden for all operators, which is a good thing in many cases to make sure that people are not force balancing. If they see the theoreticals and they know that they should have a certain amount of cash in the drawer, they can then enter that amount even though it may not be there. That is often called force balancing. If we want to try to make sure that force balancing, there's always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. People will figure it out. But if we would like to try our best to make sure that people are not force balancing, or at least not easily force balancing, we can leave this flag off, in which case it will hide theoreticals. If there is an operator that we would like to show those theoreticals to, though, we can turn this flag on so that they will be able to see them. Alright, well, What we'll do now is jump into Smart Pause and use some of those till function buttons. So just to reiterate, what we'll see in my function map here in the panels that I've got set up and how I've got this function map, the override map configured, is just how my database is set up. Yours will most likely look much different. You may need to add these till functions to your function map. You may need to add a panel to your function map for these till functions if you'd like to use them at all. But firstly, I need to go to my management panel, then to more manager functions, and then to our reports. The first one that I'll show you is the one that is the balance selection screen. I've got labeled as balance selection here, and that is literally going to show us a screen where we can select the reporting period. We can turn a few different things on that we would like to include, and we've got some things on here that we can choose to not include, to not print discounts if we'd like to hide those. We can show for operator totals, all tills in a group if we'd like to see something like that. And yeah, you can see all the different options that we've got here. I won't actually run this. And if we head back to that, I will run our daily report. By the way, I'll need to slide that over and pull up our virtual printer. There we go. And we can see our daily till balance report here. In this case, even though it is being run for the day and it's showing that it's run from breakfast through to dinner, it is going to show the same data that we saw for the shift, for the current shift till balance report in back office, because it is the only shift that we've conducted any business for, entered any sales for here. But we can see that this looks exactly the same as the report that we saw in back office. We've got the same gross sales, we have the same quantities, the same amounts for everything, the same net total, the same drawer total. We can even see the media counts that we entered in back office are shown here with that drawer difference and showing that that is under. And we can see all of our account details, miscellaneous details, and tax details as well. As I said earlier, because this can be run from both back office and Smart Pause, that is why we have those configurations at the till level that will present and be used whether we are running this from Smart Pause or from back office, and this is showing exactly that. So the next thing I'll print is we can print this for the week, and this should look a little bit different. I think I've got some sales entered for different days here. No, I don't. So in this case, bad example, maybe I'll run it for the month instead. In either case, if I scroll up, we can see that, well, I'll just wait for that. Cool, there we go. We've got some different totals here, different amounts and quantities shown as we run this for the month. But again, if I go up to show this for the week, we can see that it's how the calendar is set up for this venue in this database. It is showing it for breakfast from the 18th of April through to dinner, which is the last shift for today on the 20th of April here. And if we look at the one for the monthly totals, we can see that it is indeed, oh, this is actually showing back to the first of the year. I must have that till function set up to actually show for the year, not for the month. Let's actually take a look. So it looks like, cool. So yep, so I've got 4 entered into here, which is written in this little blurb of information here that is for the month. But if we see here, 0 for shift, 1 for the day, 2 for the week, 3 would then be for the month, and 4 is for the year. So if I save that now and we head back to Smart Pause, and now we go ahead and run that for the month, the one that's labeled the month, that has 4 entered into that, or now has 3 entered into that field. Cool, we can see that it's now being run from the 1st of April through to the 20th of April today. Cool, glad we got that figured out. Anyway, we then also have the one that I set up for operator totals. So you can see when I select that there, the first thing we'll be presented with is to enter the operator number. I think 36 is for, yep, Casey, our head waiter. So we can go ahead and run that for Casey for today. And Casey was the operator that I rung those sales in under earlier, so we can see those totals here for them. And if we go ahead and run that for the current shift, it is just going to be the same that we saw from back office earlier, which is for this workstation for this shift and all those same quantities and amounts and totals. Now in that case, that has not changed the shift for us, because that till function, that iteration of that button has not been configured, or it's been configured to skip the shift change, same as all of these others were. So what we could do now, or what the most likely workflow would be, is we would run the till balance report for the current shift, take a look at that, see if anything pops out that we need to go investigate, or something looks off, or whatever the case may be. We could then enter our media counts. In this case, they've already been entered from back office, but if they had not, then these counted amounts would not be showing here. And again, if we had the operator flag turned left off to show theoreticals, they would be hidden here. The operator that I'm logged in as now does have that flag turned on so that theoreticals are shown. But if we did want to enter counts, if they hadn't been entered already, or if we want to update the counts here, we can do so. So maybe I've recounted and I've found that extra $5, so that's now 160. Nothing for checks, nothing for FPOS, nothing for MasterCard. The Visa amount has stayed the same and the Amex amount has been the same. There we go. We've updated our media counts there, and we can go ahead and post and print those. Now, because the media counts button, till function button, has been set up to, or it has not been set up to skip the shift change, we are being prompted to skip from the breakfast shift, even though it's 3:30 in the afternoon, to change the shift from the breakfast shift to the lunch shift, because that has not happened yet today in this database. So we can go ahead and click yes there, and we can now see in SmartPause at the top left here that the shift is now the lunch shift, has just changed for us. Now again, that workflow may be different for your database, for your organization. If you'd like to enter the media counts from SmartPause or from back office, or whichever workflow you'd like to use those till functions for, if you'd like to run the balance report first and then enter media counts, or enter media count, not have the shift change occur, then run the balance report and have the shift change after the balance report has been run. Totally up to you. So what we can do now, if I quickly go back to our till balance report and we refresh this for this shift, we can see that those counts that I just entered, re-entered from SmartPause, have been updated here as well. So we now are showing no drawer difference at all, and it's showing as okay. It's not under or over, it is a-okay. Cool. So again, just a basic example here for us, but hopefully it gets the point across. What I am going to do now is I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to change my database to a different one that has a lot more data in it, even though it is still a faux training / demo database too, but it has a lot more data in it, and then we will take a look at the till balance report in that database. Okay, so I've run this here for, again, a different database that I've used for a bit over 5 years now for some training and demos and things like that, and some other training videos that you may or may not see in my BPOS. But anyway, I've run this here for all time and for the entire organization. So this is a multi-venue, a phony multi-venue environment that I've got set up here. So just to give you an idea, this has been run from, because it's set for all time, it's from the 1st of January 2001 up until today. But to give you a bit better of an idea, the first transaction is back in January 2017 on the 19th, and the most recent transaction was the 7th of March this year. But anyway, as we scroll down, we can see this is, first of all, if I just quickly scroll, we can see this is much, much longer. There's a lot more data in this report, partly because of the database itself and just having some more things occur in it, and partly because of how the till balance has been configured in this database from the till to actually run for what data is going to be shown. But so we can see that there are a few different discount totalizers that are showing here with a lot more quantity amounts and monetary amounts here. We've got some repricing, some voucher discounts, some surcharges, dollary dues, which I believe are the name for service charges in this database, and we've got some handling fees, all those things that would calculate to give us the net total. So in this case, aside from just having these discount amounts being removed from the gross sales, we have some fees and surcharges that are being added in to calculate our net total for us. Then we have a few different things going on here. Things like points that have been cashed in, petty cash payments, cash payouts and pay-ins, tips for cards, cash tips, gift certificates that have been issued, credit notes that have been issued, so on and so forth, gift certificates that have been redeemed, and as I mentioned earlier, in some cases we will then have a subtotal. We can see that over the course of time we've had 1,500 entered as floats for the drawers, which again would be if we start the drawer off with an amount. That is a common practice, so there will be maybe $200-300, whatever the case may be, that is in the drawer at the beginning of the shift that operators can use to provide change to guests, of course, and obviously that amount should then be added in with whatever's collected throughout the shift and should still be in the drawer at the end of the shift, unless there are any drawer clearances, which we can see in this case there were some drawer clearances over time here as well. Because this database does have a memberships component set up, we can see the total, the quantities and amounts that have been collected here for joining and renewal fees. We've had some raffles run here as well, and tips that have been declared that need to be paid out to operators. We come down to our payment details section. We can see quite a bit more going on here. Some different card types that have been accepted, checks, some different foreign currencies here, and again a clearance amount there, and our totals for all of these things. Well, in this case we have entered some counts here, that's what's showing here, but because I have never been consistent with entering media counts in this database, for this period that we're looking at here, we are under by just about $7.5 million, a bit over that we're under here, because the only amounts that I've entered for media counts in total over the past 5 and a bit years is 15,437, even though over 7 million has been collected in my fake database here. Anyway, we can see, coming down to the accounts details section, we can see quite a bit more going on here. We can see our total account turnover, the total points earned, spend, I guess, is however we want to look at that, the monetary value that can be associated with the amount of points that have been redeemed. Come down to the miscellaneous details section, we've got a bit more going on here as well. I mentioned earlier that this would show us no sales, canceled sales, training sales, and returns. So in a real database, if there were this amount of these things happening I mean, it's all relative to the period of time, of course, but those are the types of things that we may want to investigate or look into. Stock losses we can see as well. In this case, we do have some GST sales here, so we can see the total amount that is tax-free. And below that, we have a separate section for operator reconciliation that's going to show us operators' cash sales, the tips that have been collected, so on and so forth here for that section. That would be very important in a waiter banking environment. And we can see tip splits here. That's something that's set up in this database. These are tips that would need to be paid out to these other operators within the organization here. And then we have some sorts and types that have been selected to show in the till balance report here. So we can see those split out for sort types, sort groups, product types, and our type groups. So just a different example, a bit of a more complex one, but again, this is all fake, phony data here from a different training database. But hopefully still gives you a different idea, a better idea of what a till balance could look like. Again, this would not be covering everything that could be shown on a till balance report, and probably shows quite a bit that may or may not show in your till balance report for your database. But either way, hopefully you've gotten a pretty good idea of what this report can be used for, the different options that we have for what data we want to show or what data we want to hide, and the workflows that we can use, whether from back office or from SmartPOS, to run this report, enter media counts, and balance our tills. So as always, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you next time.